Hi, I'm Sean Romo, Senior Staff Archaeologist with Jamestown Rediscovery, and today we're going to be talking about storm damage and how it can affect archaeology here on Jamestown Island. Welcome to Dig Deeper. I'm standing here east of the 1607 palisade to talk a little bit about our cleanup efforts after the major hurricane that just passed through. Now, if you've visited the site, most days we've got archaeological excavation happening. We've got our excavation areas open just like this. But sometimes you may have seen black tarps or boards covering over where we've been digging. Now, we put these items down to protect the archaeological remains from inclement weather. That could be rainstorms, it could be high winds, or it could be cold temperatures, things that might freeze the ground. Now, the reason we need to do this is that archaeological remains are actually pretty sensitive. In most cases, we're looking at features that are comprised solely of redeposited soil, just dirt, essentially. And if we get a heavy rainstorm, let's say, those features could get really muddy. Now, that means we won't be able to do any excavation on the features because any kind of step in the vicinity may damage them, and we won't be able to see the break between the feature and the surrounding soil. And being able to see those boundaries precisely is one of the things we rely on as archaeologists to tell where things are and where we need to dig. Now, you can see behind me where we've had some water intrusion from the more recent storm that just passed through. It's actually eroded out a little bit of the wall where the water pooled. Now, in this case, not much has been damaged. This is actually all backfill, so there's nothing intact here. But we still want to avoid damage like this because it can lead to a destabilization of the wall and a collapse, covering up the archaeological features and soils that we're trying to look at. So we're always very careful. If we expect a thunderstorm in the afternoon, and in Virginia in the summer we expect a thunderstorm pretty much every day, we make sure that we place our boards back over the excavation areas and then pull a black tarp over top of it. The boards provide some support, and the black tarp actually will shunt the water right off the top. Now, for things like hurricanes or tornadoes or other major storms, we need to do a little bit more. And so we'll put the boards down, we'll put the plastic down, and then we may add extra sheets of plastic or as many sandbags as we can possibly make. Now, of course, hurricanes and tornadoes and other storms are not only a modern phenomenon. We know that they happened here in the 1600s as well. And in fact, there was at least one hurricane that hit Jamestown in the 1600s, knocking over several buildings. We also see the remains of storms or water damage in archaeological features. If you have a ditch, let's say, that's left open for a significant amount of time, and a rainstorm comes through, it's going to erode out some of the topsoil next to the ditch, and that's going to flow into the bottom as what we call wash. You can actually see that same activity in action right here, where the portions that have collapsed out of the wall are now piled up on the ground. That happens in historic features too, if they're left open to the elements. When we see that, we're able to say that a particular hole, cellar, ditch, post hole, what have you, was left open long enough for some sort of weather to affect it and soil to erode in. Now, that can be really informative for us, because if we're trying to narrow down when an archaeological feature was created, we know, let's say, it happened sometime in 1610. If we find wash in the bottom, we might then be able to tie that to a particular event. So with a major storm, obviously, water is not the only potential issue. High winds, both in the past and in the present, can damage standing structures or, in a recent case, vegetation. We just had a windstorm, actually separate from our recent hurricane, that sheared off the top of this tree, and it fell here in the cemetery east of the Memorial Church. Now, the tree actually caused very little damage when it fell. Most of the tombstones were just fine, even if the tree fell directly on them. However, there was one spot where a limb from the tree actually embedded itself a foot or two into the ground, possibly because the ground was already saturated with water from previous rainy days. And so we've been doing an excavation to try to remove that limb and to see if it damaged any of the burials. Our excavation hasn't quite gotten to the level where the burials show up yet, but we should be getting there soon and be able to tell how deep this limb actually went. So obviously, wind and rain can damage archaeological resources. One also potential source of damage that most people don't think about is from extreme cold. During the winter, a lot of times we're not expecting rain, but we still put the black tarps over our archaeological excavations. That's to prevent the ground from freezing. When the ground freezes, often there's more water held in an archaeological feature than there is in the surrounding soil. And so ice will form more readily in that feature. And you'll have a frost heave, where the ice actually pushes some of the soil up, raising it above the surrounding dirt within that feature. This frost heave can also damage artifacts. If you have ceramics, let's say, that are in the ground that are permeable to water, and water gets in there and freezes, or sometimes brickwork. Now, the church tower is in really great shape, but a lot of times when we find bricks from the 1600s, they're not in as good a shape as this, and they are susceptible to frost heave or other damage. And so we need to be really careful when we're expecting extreme cold to make sure we keep things from freezing so they don't break apart in the ground. We've been talking about small-scale damage, or relatively small-scale damage. What affects an archaeological feature, or a brick foundation, or a tree here at the site. But weather, climate change, and erosion, they can have large-scale impacts on the island as a whole. And our Director of Archaeology, Dave Gibbons, is going to talk to you guys a little bit about how that's affected Jamestown Island in the past and how it's affecting the island presently.